Millionaire husband dumped his disabled wife in the forest. Unaware, a mysterious man watched everything. From the shadow of ancient pines, he watched the abandonment unfold like a silent film. The husband's lingering glance at his wife before walking away. The woman's gradual realization as minutes stretched to hours. The camera around his neck captured what no one was meant to witness. A marriage ending, not with a goodbye, but with calculated desertion in the wilderness. Before we continue, consider my humble request to like and subscribe. It's completely free. The cold penetrated Elise's thin jacket as Thomas's footsteps faded into the distance. She shifted on the fallen log where he'd insisted she rest, the pine needles beneath her hiking boots forming a deceptively soft carpet over the hard forest floor. Her fingers trembled as they traced the metal frame of her mobility aid. How had a romantic weekend getaway turned into this nightmare? "I'll be back with help soon," he had promised, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, the same distant look he'd worn at her hospital bedside 2 years ago, when the doctors explained her partial paralysis would be permanent. 15 minutes became 30, then an hour, then 2, as shadows lengthened across the forest clearing. A tear slid down her cheek, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill seeping into her bones. As the realization settled like a stone in her stomach, Elise reached for her phone, the one Thomas had insisted on carrying to avoid distractions from their reconnection time, and found only empty pockets. What frightened her most wasn't the approaching darkness, but the tiny spark of relief that flickered beneath her fear. The temperature dropped with the sun. Elise pulled her jacket tighter, her breath forming small clouds in the darkening air. The past 2 years replayed in her mind. Thomas's increasing absences, his frustrated sighs when she needed help, the whispered phone calls ending abruptly when she entered a room. She'd attributed it all to adjustment, to grief for their old life. What a fool she'd been. "I can do this," she whispered, her voice sounding small against the vastness of the forest. She gripped her walking aid and pushed herself to stand. Pain shot through her hip, the same familiar pain she'd learned to manage daily, but tonight it felt sharper, her medication still in Thomas's backpack. Something rustled in the underbrush. Elise froze, her heart pounding. "Hello?" she called, immediately regretting breaking the silence. The rustling grew closer. Elise tightened her grip on her walking aid, holding it like a weapon. A figure emerged from between the trees. A tall man with a shaggy beard and watchful eyes, a camera hanging from a strap around his neck. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice rough as if unaccustomed to use. "Night's coming." "I'm not alone," Elise replied automatically, the lie feeling bitter on her tongue. "My husband's gone for help. He'll be back soon." The man's eyes, grey like the winter sky, studied her face, then moved to her mobility aid, then scanned the clearing. "Your husband left 3 hours ago," he said flatly, drove away in a grey SUV. Elise felt the world tilt beneath her. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nathan Coleman. I have a cabin a mile north. I was photographing eagles when I saw you both arrive. Saw him leave too." He paused, his expression unreadable. "He's not coming back." The bluntness of his words struck Elise like a physical blow. Her legs weakened, and she sank back onto the log. "You don't know that," she whispered, but even to her own ears, the protest sounded hollow. Nathan shrugged. "Temperature's dropping. You can stay here and freeze, or you can come with me. Your choice." "Why would you help me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Something flickered across Nathan's face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "I wouldn't want it on my conscience," he said finally. "That's all." It wasn't the most reassuring answer, but it was honest. Elise glanced once more at the darkening forest. Would Thomas really have left her to die? The Thomas she married 7 years ago? No. The Thomas who had changed so gradually, she barely noticed until it was too late? She wasn't sure anymore. I'll come with you, she decided, struggling again to her feet. When Nathan moved to help her, she flinched away instinctively. I can manage. He stepped back, respecting the boundary without comment. It's not an easy walk, he warned. Elise gave a bitter laugh. Nothing has been easy for 2 years. I'm used to it. As they began their slow journey through the darkening woods, Elise felt something unexpected beneath her fear and anger, a strange, tentative sense of possibility. Thomas had meant this forest to be her end. What if, instead, it became a beginning? Nathan's cabin appeared through the trees like a mirage, a solid structure of weathered logs and stone chimney, windows glowing amber against the encroaching night. Elise's legs trembled with each step, her hip a hot coal of pain. How ironic that Thomas had chosen this method of disposal for her, knowing how difficult terrain like this would be with her condition. Almost there, Nathan said, the third time he'd offered those same words. He walked a few steps ahead, occasionally glancing back but never hovering, a consideration that surprised her. The cabin's porch creaked beneath their weight as Nathan pushed open the heavy wooden door. Warmth spilled out, along with the scent of wood smoke and coffee. Elise hesitated at the threshold. What was waiting for her inside? Was she trading one danger for another? I can make up the couch, Nathan said, mistaking her hesitation. Or you can use the bed. I'll take the couch then. He ran a hand through his shaggy hair, looking almost as uncomfortable as she felt. Your choice. Choice. The how many real choices had she had these past 2 years? Why did you really help me? Elise asked, still not crossing the threshold. Nathan's grey eyes met hers directly for the first time. Because I saw what happened, and because no one helped me when I needed it. The raw honesty in his voice made something shift inside her. Elise nodded once and stepped inside. The cabin's interior was surprisingly neat, minimal but intentional. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows. Bookshelves lined another wall, packed with volumes on nature, photography, survival. No photographs of people, she noticed, no family mementos. You live here year-round? She asked, easing herself onto a sturdy wooden chair near the fire. 5 years now. Nathan moved to the small kitchen area, filling a kettle. Tea? Please. Her hands were still shaking. I need to contact the police. Nathan's movements paused, almost imperceptibly. I have internet, satellite phone too, for emergencies. He set the kettle on the stove. But you might want to think about your next move first. What do you mean? Elise's heart quickened again. Your husband didn't just leave you, he staged it. Nathan spoke matter-of-factly as he retrieved mugs from a cabinet. I watched him move your backpack to a different trail before he drove off. Left your medication bottle there too. Opened, pills scattered. The implication hit Elise like a wave of ice water. He's setting it up to look like I wandered off, got confused. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. He's told people my medication affects my thinking. It doesn't, but he's been suggesting it does for months now. Would people believe him? Nathan asked, setting a steaming mug in front of her. Elise wrapped her cold fingers around the warmth. He's very convincing, charming. Everyone loves Thomas. The mug trembled in her grip. And I've been withdrawn since the accident. People don't know me anymore. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, an owl called, a long, mournful note that seemed to echo something inside her. So what do you want to do? Nathan finally asked, taking the chair opposite hers. Elise stared into her tea, watching the ripples caused by her still trembling hands. For 2 years, her wants had been secondary to her needs, to Thomas's needs, to the demands of her changed body. I want ... Her voice caught. What did she want? Justice? Revenge? Or simply to be free? I need to think. Nathan nodded, as if this was a complete answer. "The bed's through there," he said, gesturing to a door off the main room. "Bathroom too. I'll be out here if you need anything." In the small bedroom, Elise sank onto the edge of the bed, reality crashing over her in waves. Thomas had left her to die. Her husband of 7 years had calculated her death. Had he been planning this all along? Was that why he'd insisted on this trip, this remote location? She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Grief for the marriage she thought she had, fear for what came next, and beneath it all, a smoldering anger that surprised her with its intensity. She had survived the accident that tried to claim her life. She had fought through rehab that everyone said was impossible, and Thomas thought a forest would defeat her. Elise lifted her head, tears drying on her cheeks. Through the small window, the forest stretched dark and vast beneath a star-filled sky. This place where Thomas had abandoned her, it had claimed other things too, she sensed. Looking around the sparse room at Nathan's carefully ordered solitude, she wondered what the forest had taken from him. Tomorrow she would decide what to do. Tonight she would simply survive. One more night of enduring. She had become an expert at that, if nothing else. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through pine branches. For one blissful moment, Elise remembered nothing. Then reality crashed back. Thomas, the forest, the stranger's cabin. How quickly a life could unravel. The smell of coffee drew her from the bedroom. She found Nathan at his desk, focused intently on his laptop screen. He looked up when she entered, nodding toward a pot on the small stove. "There's coffee," he said, his voice still rough with disuse, "and oatmeal, if you want it." Elise made her way to the kitchen area, conscious of his gaze tracking her movements, assessing her mobility limitations. She was used to that, the calculating look people gave her, measuring her capabilities against what they considered normal. What she wasn't used to was the lack of pity that followed. "Find anything interesting on there?" she asked, nodding toward his laptop as she poured coffee. Nathan hesitated. "I looked up your husband." The coffee sloshed over the rim of the mug, burning her fingers. "Why?" "Wanted to know what I'm dealing with." His eyes met hers, direct and unapologetic. "He reported you missing last night, said you wandered off during your hike, search parties forming this morning." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Elise gripped the counter for support. "That was fast." "Too fast," Nathan agreed, almost like he had it planned. Elise made her way to the table, setting down her mug with deliberate care. "Show me." Nathan turned the laptop toward her. A local news site showed Thomas, his handsome face drawn with what looked convincingly like worry, standing beside a sheriff's deputy. The headline read, "Real estate developer's wife missing in Piney Ridge Forest." Elise Harrington, 38, who has struggled with health issues since a car accident 2 years ago, wandered away from the trail during an afternoon hike with her husband. She read aloud, her voice growing tighter with each word. Thomas Harrington immediately alerted authorities. Search teams are concerned about dropping temperatures and Harrington's medical needs. Her husband reports she may be disoriented due to medication. Nausea rose in her throat. "They make me sound like a confused child." Her fingers hovered over the screen, tracing Thomas's concerned expression. Had he practiced that look in the mirror before speaking to reporters? "He's always been good at playing a role." "What do you want to do?" Nathan asked. Elise stared at the screen, at Thomas's performance of grief. If she revealed herself now, who would believe her version over his? A partially disabled woman with health issues against a respected businessman with influential friends? "I need time," she said finally, "to figure out what evidence I can gather against him." She looked up at Nathan. "Would you let me stay here?" "Just for a few days until I can figure things out?" Nathan studied her, his expression unreadable. Was he regretting his decision to help her? "Why not go to the police now?" he asked. "Tell them what happened." Elise gave a bitter laugh. And say what? That my perfect husband tried to kill me by leaving me in the woods, with no evidence except my word against his? She shook her head. Thomas has been laying groundwork for months, suggesting to our friends that my medication affects my thinking. The accident damaged more than my body. It damaged my credibility. That's calculated, Nathan observed, his voice hardening slightly. Thomas calculates everything. Elise wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, drawing warmth from it. I need to find out why. Why now? He's stuck with me for 2 years since the accident. Something must have changed. Nathan was silent for a long moment, then closed his laptop. You can stay, he said finally. But we need supplies if you're going to be here. I wasn't planning on a house guest. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by wariness. Why are you helping me? Really? Nathan stood, turning away to look out the window at the forest beyond. I recognized the look, he said quietly. What look? The one your husband had when he walked away from you. His shoulders were tense beneath his flannel shirt. I've seen it before. The pain in his voice raised more questions than it answered, but Elise didn't press. Everyone had their reasons for retreating to the forest. She was beginning to understand that. After Nathan left for town, Elise explored the cabin, noting its sparse efficiency. By the window, she found what must be his work. Photographs of the forest in all seasons. The images captured something more than just landscape. They revealed hidden patterns, secret moments, life persisting in harsh conditions. In one, new growth pushed through charred earth after a forest fire. In another, an injured wolf limped through snow, its determination palpable. Did Nathan see himself in these broken, persistent things? Did he see her? Outside the cabin window, the forest stretched endlessly, both threat and shelter. Somewhere out there, search parties were calling her name, looking for a woman who didn't want to be found. Not yet, not until she understood why her husband had chosen to erase her. Nathan returned in the late afternoon, his arms full of supplies. They've expanded the search area, he announced as he entered. Your husband's offering a reward now, $10,000 for information. Elise's stomach tightened. He's really selling this, isn't he? Playing the devastated husband perfectly. Nathan began unpacking groceries. I found something in town, he said, changing the subject. He pulled a newspaper from one of the bags. This might explain your husband's timing. Elise took the paper, her hands suddenly unsteady. The business section featured an article about Thomas's company, Harrington Development. They were breaking ground on a major new project, a luxury wilderness resort just 20 miles from where they sat. He's been trying to get this approved for years, she murmured, scanning the article. There were environmental concerns, indigenous land rights issues. I thought it had been permanently blocked. Apparently not, Nathan said. The article mentions unexpected financial backing that revived the project. Elise frowned, reading further. This will be worth millions to Thomas, but I don't see how... Her voice trailed off as understanding dawned. My grandmother's trust fund. What about it? She left me a significant inheritance. It becomes fully accessible on my 40th birthday. Elise looked up from the paper, pieces falling into place. That's in 3 weeks. And who controls it if something happens to you? Nathan asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Thomas. The word felt bitter on her tongue. As my husband, he'd have legal claim, but he'd need to prove I was dead or... She paused, the full picture becoming clearer. Or have me declared mentally incompetent. Which explains the medication story, Nathan concluded. If they find your body, he gets everything immediately. If they don't, he can petition for control of my assets as my missing spouse, Elise finished. Either way, he gets the money to fund his project. They sat in silence as the implications settled between them. Finally, Elise folded the newspaper, her movements deliberate, controlled. "I need access to our financial records," she said, "and our home computer. Thomas keeps everything password protected, but I might be able to find something we can use against him." "You're talking about breaking into your own house?" Nathan looked skeptical. "That's risky." "Do you have a better idea?" Elise challenged. "I need evidence of his plans." "Why do you hate him so much?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know Thomas." Nathan's movement stilled. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled. "I know his type." He turned to face her, his expression hard. "Men who use power to hurt people who trust them. Men who discard what's broken instead of helping fix it." The personal pain behind his words was unmistakable. Elise wanted to ask more, but held back. They were still strangers, bound by circumstance, not confidence. "The search will continue for a few days," Nathan said, returning to practicalities. "After that, they'll assume the worst, especially with the cold nights. We should wait it out here." "And then what?" "Then we figure out how to prove what he did." Nathan's certainty was somehow reassuring. "But you need to rest and heal first. You're no good to yourself exhausted." Days passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. While search parties combed the forest miles away, Elise established a new routine in Nathan's cabin. Mornings were for strengthening exercises, adaptations of her physical therapy regimen. Afternoons were for planning, for gathering information through Nathan's internet connection. Evenings were for rest, for rebuilding her strength. "They're scaling back the search," Nathan announced on the 5th morning. "Your husband gave a statement yesterday. Heartbroken but beginning to accept the possibility of the worst outcome." Elise looked up from where she was stretching her hip. "Let me guess. Brave face, shaky voice, single manly tear?" "Pretty much." Nathan turned the screen to show her the news clip. Thomas stood at a podium, expression perfectly calibrated between hope and grief. "He's good," Elise admitted, watching the performance with newfound clarity. "I believed that face for years." "What was he like?" Nathan asked, closing the laptop. "Before?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about the before Thomas in a long time. People were too uncomfortable with the topic of her accident, too eager to focus on recovery and positivity. "Ambitious," she said after a moment. "Charming, the kind of person who filled a room when he entered it." She reached for her water bottle, buying time to sort through memories. "He was kind, I think. Or I believed he was." Looking back, I can see the calculation in so many of his kind gestures, how they always seemed to happen when others were watching. "And after your accident?" "Disappointed." The word emerged with surprising bitterness. "Not openly, he was too careful for that, but I could feel it in how he looked at me, how he'd sigh when he thought I couldn't hear." She met Nathan's eyes. "Have you ever watched someone try to hide their resentment while they help you shower? It's quite an education." Nathan looked away, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the image. "People show their true nature in crisis." "Is that what happened to you?" Elise asked, seizing the opening. "Some crisis revealed someone's true nature?" Nathan's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he would retreat, as he did whenever personal questions arose. Instead, he stood and moved to the window, looking out at the forest as he spoke. "I was a journalist, investigative reporting." His voice was flat, as if reciting facts about someone else. 8 years ago, I was working on a story about corporate corruption, unsafe practices, bribery of officials, workers getting sick, standard exposé." Elise remained silent, afraid any interruption would break the sudden flow of confidence. "The company was owned by a powerful family, old money, political connections." Nathan's reflection in the window looked haunted. "I thought I had protection. My editor, the paper's lawyers. I was wrong." What happened? Elise asked softly when he paused. They buried the story. My editor claimed insufficient evidence. His hands clenched at his sides. Then sources started recanting. One disappeared entirely. My reputation was systematically destroyed. Accusations of fabrication, plagiarism, even extortion. He turned from the window, his expression harder than she'd seen it. I lost everything. Job, savings fighting legal battles, fiancé who didn't sign up for loving a pariah. A bitter smile touched his lips. I came here to lick my wounds, temporary escape that became permanent. You never tried to clear your name? How? The system was rigged against me. The same system your husband is using against you. His eyes met hers. The truth doesn't matter when power decides what reality should be. The parallel between their situations hung in the air between them. Different circumstances, same fundamental injustice. Powerful men rewriting reality to suit their purposes. That's why you helped me, Elise realized. You saw yourself. Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with her perception. I saw someone being erased. Before she could respond, his satellite phone rang, a jarring sound in the quiet cabin. Nathan frowned, checking the display before answering. Maya, he said by way of greeting. Then, slow down. What? His expression changed as he listened, eyes darting to Elise. When? Another pause. No, don't do that. I'll handle it. Thanks for the warning. He ended the call, tension visible in every line of his body. That was my contact in town. Your husband's coming to see me. What? Elise straightened, adrenaline flooding her system. How does he even know about you? Someone mentioned seeing my truck near the search area. He's been asking questions. Nathan's mind was clearly racing. Maya overheard him at her store. He's bringing the sheriff, coming to interview me about potential sightings. When? Tomorrow morning. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. We have to get you out of here. And go where? Panic edged into Elise's voice. There's nowhere else. Maya has a rental cabin on her property. It's small, but no one would look for you there. He was already moving, gathering essentials. We need to leave within the hour. Nathan. Elise caught his arm, forcing him to stop. If Thomas suspects you know something, he won't let it go. He'll make trouble for you. Let him try. The quiet confidence in Nathan's voice should have been reassuring, but something in his expression raised alarm bells. What aren't you telling me? She pressed. Nathan hesitated, then sighed. Your husband's resort development? The one that article mentioned? He gestured toward the window, to the forest beyond. It would destroy the watershed that feeds this entire valley. Endangered species, old-growth forest, all gone for golf courses and luxury cabins. You knew about the project already, Elise realized, before I showed up. I've been documenting the ecosystem here for years, fighting the development through legal channels. His expression darkened. Your husband's company has been trying to discredit my research, claim I'm an unstable eco-extremist. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. So when Thomas comes tomorrow, he'll have double reason to cause problems, Nathan confirmed. Finding you here would be convenient justification to have me arrested, my research discredited. This isn't just about helping me, Elise said quietly. It's about your fight too. Does that change anything? Challenge flashed in his eyes. Did it? Elise considered the question. Did Nathan's additional motives make his help less valuable? Or did it simply make their alliance more honest? Two damaged people recognizing a common enemy. Pack what we need, she decided. I'll be ready in 30 minutes. As they prepared to flee, Elise caught sight of her reflection in the cabin's small bathroom mirror. The woman who looked back was thinner, her eyes harder, more determined than the woman Thomas had left in the forest a week ago. She barely recognized herself. Was that a good thing? Through the open door, she could see Nathan efficiently packing supplies, his movements precise, practiced, a man accustomed to having escape routes planned. Could she trust him? Fully? Perhaps not. But in a world where her husband had tried to erase her existence, partial trust was the best she could offer anyone. Maya's rental cabin perched on the edge of her property like an afterthought, a tiny structure half hidden by spruce trees, weathered to the same grey as the stones surrounding it. Nothing like Nathan's orderly cabin, this place had clearly been shaped by multiple hands over many years, mismatched windows, a door that had been painted at least 3 different colors in its lifetime. "It's not much," Maya said as she unlocked the door. She was a compact woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. "But no one comes back here except to chop wood or fix the generator." "It's perfect," Elise said, meaning it. After the sterile luxury of her life with Thomas, there was something honest about this humble space. Maya gave her a sharp look. "Nathan says your husband tried to leave you to die in my forest. That true?" The bluntness of the question startled a laugh from Elise. "Yes." "Men." Maya spat the word like a curse. "Had one like that myself, years back. Not as slick as yours sounds, but same rotten core." She handed Elise the key. "Well, he doesn't get to win, not in my forest." After Maya left, Elise and Nathan settled into an uneasy quiet, arranging their few possessions in the small space. One room with a kitchenette in the corner, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, a lumpy sofa that would convert to a bed. "This is insane," Elise murmured, reality crashing down around her. "I'm hiding in a stranger's cabin while my husband and the sheriff search for me. When did this become my life?" "When Thomas decided your life was worth less than his ambitions." Nathan's voice was matter-of-fact, not pitying. "The question is what you're going to do about it now." She sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. "What can I do? It's his word against mine, and he's been setting this up for months." "Maybe not just his word." Nathan hesitated, then crossed to his backpack, withdrawing a small camera. "I have these." He turned on the display, scrolling through images. Elise's breath caught as she recognized herself on the screen, sitting alone on the fallen log where Thomas had left her, Thomas walking away through the trees, his car driving off on the distant forest road. "You photographed everything?" she whispered. "I document things. Old habit." Nathan handed her the camera. "It doesn't show him explicitly saying he's abandoning you, but it shows him leaving, you alone, hours passing. Combined with his suspicious behavior afterward, it might be enough." Before Elise could respond, his satellite phone buzzed with a text message. Nathan checked it, his expression darkening. "They're searching my cabin now. Sheriff Jenkins and your husband." Elise's heart raced. "Did you leave anything that would suggest I was there?" "Number, I was careful." Nathan pocketed the phone. "But Thomas isn't just looking for you, he's looking for leverage against me and my environmental work." "The development project." Elise's mind raced. "Nathan, my grandmother's trust. There's something I haven't told you." He looked at her expectantly. She owned land in this area, significant acreage. Elise struggled to piece together memories of legal conversations she'd half listened to over the years. Thomas always said it was worthless property, too remote for development. But what if it's not? What if it's connected to this project somehow? Nathan's expression changed. "Do you know where exactly?" "No, but..." She paused, an idea forming. "My grandmother's lawyer would know. Howard Brennan in Mapleton. I haven't spoken to him since the funeral, but he should still have all the records." "Can you contact him without alerting Thomas?" "I think so. He always liked me, thought Thomas was." She smiled faintly. "I believe his exact words were slicker than a greased weasel." For the first time since she'd met him, Nathan laughed, a short, surprised sound that transformed his face. Good judge of character. 3 hours later, after a tense and emotional call with a shocked Howard Brennan, Elise sat staring at the notes she'd scribbled during their conversation. "It's worse than I thought," she finally said, looking up at him. "The land Thomas wants for his resort. Half of it is mine. My grandmother left it with specific provisions. It can never be developed commercially, only used for conservation or healing purposes." "Healing purposes?" Nathan repeated. She had this dream of a rehabilitation center, specifically for people with spinal injuries. Elise's voice caught. "She included it in her will years before my accident. Howard said she believed in the healing power of nature. And let me guess, Thomas never mentioned this to you." "No," bitterness coated the word. "He told me the inheritance was just money, investments. He's been managing it all since her death 3 years ago." She looked down at her notes again. "But the bulk of it, the land and funds for the rehabilitation center, that all transfers to my complete control when I turn 40, 3 weeks from now." "Unless you're dead," Nathan said quietly. "Or declared mentally incompetent." "Yes." Elise met his eyes. "Howard is looking into that angle now. What legal maneuvers Thomas might be planning, but he's concerned." She hesitated. "He thinks I should come forward immediately, before Thomas can establish more of his narrative." "And what do you think?" Elise looked out the small window toward the forest. Somewhere out there, search teams were half-heartedly looking for her body, while Thomas prepared to profit from her disappearance. The woman they were searching for, the dependent, fragile wife, no longer existed, but was she ready to show the world who she had become instead? "I think," she said slowly, "that Thomas isn't the only one who can plan ahead. I think it's time we stopped reacting and started acting." Nathan studied her with new respect. "What did you have in mind?" "First, we gather evidence. Your photos, Howard's legal documentation, proof of Thomas's financial maneuvers." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Then we build allies, Maya, Howard, anyone else who might stand with us against Thomas's influence. And then," Nathan prompted when she paused. "Then we take back my grandmother's legacy." Determination hardened her voice. "And make Thomas regret the day he left me in these woods." 1 year later, the Chen Forest Rehabilitation Center welcomed its first residents, 6 individuals with spinal injuries similar to Elise's, coming for a program that combined conventional therapy with nature-based healing. The main building stood where Elise had once been abandoned, its wide windows facing the forest that had both threatened and sheltered her. In the entry hall, a photography exhibition captured the forest's cycle of destruction and renewal after the wildfire that had swept through months earlier, Nathan's stunning images documenting nature's resilience. Among them, one photograph stood slightly apart, a woman sitting alone on a fallen log, the setting sun casting her in silhouette, vulnerability and determination somehow equally visible in her posture. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "The journey begins where we are, not where we planned to be." Elise often paused before this image during her busy days directing the center's programs. It reminded her of endings that become beginnings, of strength found in unexpected places, of the transformative power of being truly seen. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Elise would return to the spot where Thomas had left her, now transformed into a meditation garden for residents. Sitting there, she would remember the woman she had been that day, frightened, betrayed, believing herself alone, and marvel at how abandonment had ultimately led her home, not just to a place, but to herself. The forest had witnessed her at her most vulnerable. Now it witnessed her at her strongest, not despite her injury, not despite her abandonment, but somehow, mysteriously, because of the journey both had forced upon her. That, perhaps, was the deepest healing of all. For now, that was enough. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of love to break down walls and bridge any divide. Please do comment your feedback and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of family, redemption, and the triumph of love over pride. Remember, it's never too late to change your story.